All right. And good day, everyone, and welcome to today's session of Truly Foundation and A Course in Miracles. And hi, my name is Oliver, and I will be your host for today's session, your temporary guide, your temporary coach. And I am so delighted that the day has come, the time has come for us to get together around this grand purpose of renewing our minds, this purpose of mind training, mind reversal, all that the course talks about. And in this session, we are going to have a little fun. We're going to expand our awareness. We are going to enjoy the vibration that we're creating here. We're going to enjoy the experience. And we're going to do that today by looking at workbook lesson 259. Yes, workbook lesson 259 in the workbook for students section of A Course in Miracles. And today we're going to turn our attention to the S word. We're gonna use the S word for our focus for today. And you might be asking, well, Oliver, what is the S word? Well, in religious communities, they call it sin. S-I-N. And so today's idea centers around us getting clarity around the S word. And it is so important that we really have a now moment understanding of what the S word really was made to do, because it wasn't a creation, where that thought came from, how it has impacted us, and what is the right, or what is the more complete, the more whole understanding, so that we don't continue to trip over, allow our minds to be tripped over, to allow our minds to trip over, and to allow our minds to be trapped into a idea that was made by humanity and humanity's lack of awareness that created such an impact, such a negative impact. And it continues to create such a negative impact in the lives of people, to the point where they can't get past that man-made idea. And it's not only affecting their perception of themselves, it affects one's self-image, and it also affects that which it appears to affect that which can't be affected. It appears to have threatened reality. The S word appears to have a threatened reality, but in reality, nothing can threaten reality. In truth, nothing can threaten the truth. Nothing can threaten God. That which is real cannot be threatened. And what is the real? What do we establish as what is real? That which is real is God only. That which is real is love only. Everything outside of love or outside of God does not exist. It's unreal. And so therefore it doesn't exist. And therein, us embracing that reality or allowing that to be the basis for our requirement in this perceptual world to interpret or to perceive, because we're in a world of perception. So that means we have to participate in the perceptual world, but not as using a system of thought that causes us to perceive incorrectly, but we used a system of thought which we call the mind of Christ, which we call the truth or knowledge or the one law of God. We allow that to be the basis for our, what the Course calls true perception, so that we can free ourselves from the vain imaginings, that we can free ourselves from being in a state of self-deception. And so that we can free ourselves from the imprisonment that we placed ourselves in, not because that is what we desired, but because of that is what we allow to condition us and to shape us, and ultimately give us a sense of separation, not only from God, but from one another. And so we're going to straighten that up today by talking about the S word. We call it the S word, yes. And so the thought for today is Workbook lesson 259 says, let me remember that there is, that word is always, when you see the word is, it's always a reference to the present tense. It's always a reference to the present tense. Now, if you guys are listening to me today, this is going to really set you free. Jesus said that it is the truth that you know that will set you free. Truth in and of itself won't set you free. It's the truth that you know that will set you free. It's the truth that you become intimately acquainted with that will set you free. And there's only one truth, and that is God is. When we say God is, that means that what? That is an all-encompassing statement. We've shared this before. When we say I am, that's an all-encompassing statement. I am, God is simply a reference to the truth that is true always. That God is and there is nothing else. That I am, which is that which God extended and called it the I am. God extended himself. God didn't make up something, go get something from somewhere else and extend that. But no, God took God in its only way of functioning, extended himself. That's what love does. Love just extends itself. Because that's all there is in reality. That's all there is. When all the smoke is cleared, when all the dead bodies are removed, when all the destruction finally take its course, when all that we have tried to make ourselves as a substitute for what is, when all of that is over and done with, in other words, when the universe disappears as we know it, the only thing that's going to be left is love. The only thing that's going to be left is God. And the only thing that's going to be left is what God extended or what God created. And what God created is the I am, which is who we are. Only thing that's going to be left, if we try to put it in biblical terms, is going to be the Christ. And what does the Christ represent? The Christ represents all that God is, including that which God has extended. That's why in biblical terms, it said all things have been reconciled into the one thing. All things have been reconciled into Christ. So basically the idea is that oneness is all that there has ever been and all that there will ever be. And we are a part of that oneness. We are part of that one self. In a perceptual world, there's billions of cells. It appears to be billions of cells, billions of individuals. There appears to be this personal self that we are aware of that has a name and a social security number. And that personal self seems to be not only separate from all other cells, but it has a sense of separation from its creator. And we experience that in the form of anxiety. We experience that in the form of fear. We experience that in the form of guilt. We experience that in the form of judgment. We've experienced that in the form of a consciousness and an awareness that is misaligned. And that's the human experience on the negative side. But there is a peace that passes all understanding. And it comes when we embrace the reality that God is and there is nothing else. That the reality that there is this ultimate and there is no threat to the ultimate. In other words, it can't be changed or altered. Peace comes as a result of embracing and welcoming and accepting for yourself that which is outside of that one love or that one God or that one self. It does not exist. It's like an illusion. When we embrace this becomes the foundation of our seeing. This becomes the foundation of our perceiving. This becomes the foundation of our thinking. Then we abide and we rest in the peace because we know that what? All things are the one thing and we're part of the one thing. Therefore, we're not taken away by all of the special effects of this world, but that all things are working together and has worked together for our good, for our joy and our happiness. And we now can stand and be, like it says, to prove what that good and acceptable and perfect will of God is. Now we can be put on display to prove, to be proof that there's only the one will, that there's only God's will and there's nothing else. And so let us remember that there is no sin. I'm going to say it again. This is our thought for today. Let us remember that there is no sin. And this thought has to be introduced in this section. Why? Because we fluctuate, we vacillate back and forth with the consciousness towards sin and our consciousness and a consciousness towards our freedom, our oneness with God. We vacillate back and forth. Or I say we, who is the we that's vacillating back and forth? It is not the real you that loves you, but it is the mind. It is the mind that we are associated with that still have some residual effects of the idea, or we can say of the virus. It still has some residual effect, some remembrance of an idea that has been planted within all of us, that a virus that has been planted in all of us through an idea. Not that it is real, but the idea was planted into all of us. We all know about the virus of what? Romans 3:23. Everybody know. I mean, even people that don't attend, people that haven't been churched, people that haven't read the Bible, people that haven't been nowhere near spirituality, but they still know about the virus of Romans 3:23. And those of us that were nurtured, and those of us that were brought up in the throes of what the scripture or the Bible says about the S word, we got it real bad. We had a bad case of it. We got a bad dose of it. How even here in the natural we see that, thank God that we're in a better place. But you think back 2 years ago, back in 2020 or even 2021, where there was a time where this COVID-19 virus was having its way among the population. And you would notice that some parts of the population, that when they call them those that are high risk, when certain parts of the population would come in contact with the virus because they were high risk, meaning they had a low immunity, or their immune system was not in peak performance, and it affected them in a much grander way. Those who their health was not, at a certain level, that it would affect them in a certain way. We know that there was over millions of lives lost because of this COVID virus. And so some got a overdose. It seemed that they got an overdose of it, to the point that it crippled some. Some lives were lost, and some people have long-term effects from it. And then some got the virus, and it seemed like they didn't even have the virus. And that's what I mean when I say those of us that have been, brought up in the biblical community where we was taught, Romans 3:23, is like we got an overdose of that virus. And I'm going to read it from Romans. I'm going to read that so y'all won't think I'm just talking here. But Romans 3:23 says in the Bible that, and this was Paul talking. And this was Paul. Let's give you a reference here. Talking. Paul being a leader out of the Old Testament, or the Old Testament system, which we call the law, that was given to a certain group of people, that they were to follow the law, and they couldn't break the law. If they did, they had to be atoned for. So this is the thinking that he's coming from. So here in Romans 3:23, and he's talking to those that were not churched, those that were not under the law, of not believers in that system. They were not of the Levitical priesthood system. And so he said here that, so under that system, they came to the conclusion that we were all, we can't keep the law. We can't follow all the rules. So we all are put in the same boat. That's the analogy that he's using here. And so he made the statement. He said, for all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. For all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. And so that whole idea that Paul used was just a carryover from the consciousness of the people of that system. They just carried it over. When Christianity was created, they carried that idea over into Christianity. and that idea that was in their system was an idea that was not a God idea. It was their perception of God. It was which caused a perception of themselves, to see themselves as separate from God, because sin basically is a belief in separation. Simply stated, the idea of sin comes from the belief that we are separate from God, from our Creator, as well as from each other. That's what sin means, to separation. That something has gone wrong, something has been broken, something has been disconnected. And that was the whole idea. That is, separation occurred. But in reality, when you lay that idea up against the reality and the foundation for which the course here establishes that which is real can't be threatened, that which is real cannot be changed or altered. So where does the idea that separation can really happen? Where did that idea come from? It can't come from the one that says nothing real can be threatened. It can't come from the one that says reality is that which cannot be altered or changed. So where did it come from? It came from humanity. It came from our false or wrong interpretation of ourselves. In fact, the Course says that sin is basically a false idea concerning humanity. It's over here. If we turn over to page 401 in the workbook lesson for students, under the section, what is forgiveness? Let me show you here what it says. This will help us here. It says, forgiveness recognizes what you thought your brother did to you has not occurred. We can apply this to the fact that God is and there is nothing else. So when the thought of something else enters into that which God has extended, then that idea that something did occur, that's what we call the tiny man idea. The belief in separation. What is the tiny man idea? The Course calls it the tiny man idea. And the reason it calls it a tiny and a mad idea is because it has no basis. It has no foundation to establish itself as the truth. It is looking for something or somewhere or somebody to embrace the idea. It's looking for some energy to breathe life into that idea, which is not a true idea. It has no basis of its own. It will not stand unless there is someone or something that will allow its existence or its reality to be used to have this thought or idea oppressed upon it. And so it says, forgiveness recognizes that what we thought our brother did has not occurred. That there is no threat, there is no attack, there is no separation. There's only God and nothing else. And that which God extended is one with that which God is. And so if that which God extended is just like God, that means that there is no threat, there's no alteration or change to which God creates. It said it does not pardon sins and make them real. Why? Because sins are unreal. It said it sees there is no sin. True forgiveness sees there is no sin. There is no separation. Put it to you that way. There is no alteration. There is no change. But why? Because it is impossible for God to change. It's impossible for God to create or to extend anything other than what the very nature of God is, which is love. So everything or anything that's outside of God or outside of love does not exist. But the idea of that is what we can say is the S word. The idea that there's something outside of God. You see that in the creation story with Adam and Eve. You see that in the story of the prodigal son. In both stories, as the story goes, both the prodigal son and Adam and Eve was motivated by a false idea that God has withheld something from them. And so they was what? They're going to separate themselves and go find it. It's called self-deception. Only to both ended up what? In a wreck. Both the prodigal son and Adam and Eve ended up in shipwreck. And we're still feeling the effect, the what? We are still in 2022 feeling the residual effect of that. Tiny mad idea. And so it goes on to say that it has not occurred. Nothing has occurred. The tiny mad idea of separation entered into the idea. It entered into the mind of humanity. What would it be like to be separate from God? Or what is God holding back from us? Or, it's like this power suggestion. And God's response to that was, what? There is no separation. There is nothing outside of me. It's God and there's nothing else. And so, if there's anything that is outside of God, it has to be an illusion. It has to be an illusion. It has to be something that we make up. It's not real. It has to be dreamlike. We know in dreams they're not real. Like a shadow, it's not real. We know that from a natural point of view. But when we try to make that which is not real, real, that whole process is where the S word comes from. Notice now, just because it is interpreted as that doesn't make it real. It just makes it what? An interpretation in this world of perception. And so the next statement says, and in this view are all sins forgiven. In what view? There is none. The idea of the one tiny thought says, what would it be like to be separation from God? The response was that there is no separation. Why? It's impossible. And so for us to adventure into the possibility of separation from God and each other, what? We had to fall into what? A dream-like state. The Bible even said that, Adam fell asleep, but it never said, well, he woke up. And that's kind of true. Adam wakes up when you wake up to the truth. That's when he wakes up. When you wake up to the truth that there is no separation, that you and God are one, that you share the same love, the same life, the same being, the same self that God is. That is the awakening, or the grand awakening. That is the new birth, as the Bible might call it. When you wake up to the truth and reality that there is no separation, that we're not separate from God, or we're not separate from each other. There's only the one, and we all share in that oneness. I hope this is registering, and I know it is. And then the next line says, what is sin? What is it? What is the S word? What is it? What is the significance of it? And here it is. I love it. It says, what is sin except a false idea about God's creation? It's just a false idea about God's creation. Well, what is God's creation? You and me. And when we hold a false idea, and what is that false idea? The belief in separation. That we have somehow, some way, successfully separated ourselves from our creation, from our creator, and that is impossible. We are a God idea, and ideas leave not their source. What is our source? Our source is God. Our source is love. So it's impossible for us to leave our source. We can only leave in vain imagining. We can only leave in fantasies, in hallucinations, in dreams of separation. In reality, we cannot leave. And in reality, you have not left. You remain in the heart of God. The real you, not the body self. that has birth and death, not the body self that is limited, not the body self that is born in time and space, not the body self that is founded in the belief in scarcity and loss and separation and death. Not the body self that is unstable in all its functioning. But we're talking about, like the ticker says there, we're talking about the real you that loves you, because the real you is love. That is what's unalterable. That is what is sinless. That is what is guiltless. That is what remains as God created it, whole and complete, with a purpose. That is the real you. That is the you that's never been changed, never been altered, or never been affected by the virus of Romans 3:23. You have not fallen short. You have not separated yourself from your Creator. That is a perception and an idea that was created by humanity. How can love even think of such a preposterous thing? How could God even think of something so preposterous? How could you, just think about you in the natural, how could you as a natural parent ever conceive of the idea of shutting the door, closing off yourself, and separating yourself from your own offspring? How can we have such a love for our own children that is unchangeable, that is unalterable, that nothing can separate us from the love of our own natural children, even in all that they do, to hurt and harm themselves? How could we have such a love that we look past that and only see the beauty, the love that we have for them? Because they are our idea, they're our offsprings. So how can we have that kind of love and then turn around and say the God of love can ever separate from that which He created? Is our love, is our human love greater than the love of God? No. So where did that idea come from? It came from humanity. It came that it was a false interpretation that we made up ourselves. We said God has to be mad at us. God has had to kick us out. God had all this we made up. It was our response to what we didn't know. It was our response to seeing ourselves not as God sees us. And anytime that we see ourselves as the way God doesn't see us, we're going to end up, like it says here, this is a false idea about us. God is love only. Why? Because there is only love. So any idea that is not loving, it's not of God. So this Romans 3:23 virus that has affected humanity all down through the years, because they embraced this idea as their very own. What idea? That we all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. That was not God's opinion. That was not God's point of view. That was our own response. That was our own interpretation, and based on a love that we didn't know about, based on a love that we made up. You know how human love is. It is so fickle and it vacillates. It's conditional. But we're talking about an unconditional love that God is, that is unalterable and unchangeable. That's why Paul later on picked up in that same Romans that said nothing can separate us. See, he corrected himself. First he said, we all have come short. We have all separated. Then he corrected himself later on by saying what? Nothing can separate us. So he got a revelation. Nothing can separate us. Separation did not occur. He said, nor life, nor death, nor things present, nor things in the past, nor things to come could ever separate us from the love of God that was demonstrated in the life of Christ. And so, even though that is true, we still are holding on to that tiny mad idea at some degree, or we still have some residual effect of ever having been told that. Aren't you still having residual effects of what your parents said about certain things that were not true? You remember there was one time that they said what? The earth was flat. And all humanity believed that earth was flat. Because that's all the awareness that they had. It only made logical sense. Because if the world was round, it appeared that we would fall off. If the world was round, it appeared and moving, it would appear that we will eventually, all fall off of it. So it didn't make sense to us. So it had to be flat. But there was what? Limited awareness. But when the grander awareness came, when humanity became aware that the earth is not flat, but it is actually round, and that it's also spinning. See, they didn't understand things. They didn't understand the law of gravity. The law of gravity is what keeps us grounded. That we don't all just float up. That we don't all just fall off into the ocean. So it was our lack of awareness. Before there was the idea of a tin can weighing hundreds of tons flying through the air at 500 miles an hour. Before we had the awareness of that, there was a belief that we couldn't fly, that only birds could fly, that we couldn't be in the air like that. But we didn't have the awareness for it. But now, when the awareness came, and the idea was placed in the mind of individuals. And then the Wright brothers proved that, hey, this is a possibility. And now look at us in 2022. Planes are moving through the air at supersonic speeds. Why? Because we have the awareness of it. Well, listen, we're bringing you an awareness today of the S word that will help you once and for all will help you to understand that there is no sin, that there is no effect of sin. That is all an illusion. That's all in the mind that still believe is separate. And that when the mind is updated, that when the mind is renewed, when we embrace that mind, like he said, let this mind be in you that was also in Christ Jesus. What mind? The sinless, guiltless mind. Our real mind, the mind of God. When we allow that to be, then we will also embrace, like it says in Philippians, that let this mind be in you that was also in Christ, who being in the form of God, thought it not robbery to have equality with God, to be equal with God. When you let go of the falsity, when you let go of that old idea that was not based on reality, but it was based on unreality. It was based on a lack of knowledge. It was based on a lack of awareness. When you finally let that go and only embrace that which is true, you will not only know that you are sinless, you will not only know that there is no sin nowhere. You will also know that because of that knowing that you are sinless and guiltless and innocent, you'll also experience your equality with your Creator, just like Christ Jesus of Nazareth did. You will have the same experience right now. The sin consciousness, the guilt and fear will disappear in your thinking. And when it disappears in your thinking, it would disappear in your feelings. And when it disappears in your feelings, guess what? It will be removed from your actions. And when it's removed from your actions, what is the result? You become the light of the world, which Jesus said you are. But you got to deal with this, with the residual effect of the false idea about yourself. You are the holy home of God. You are the innocence of God. You are to the praise of his glory. You are what God is, and God is what you are. You share the same life, the same love, the same being, the same self that God is. That's why Jesus said, I and my Father are one. He got it. He understood it. He said, when you see me, you see the Father. You can make the same declaration because it's true. You can make the same declaration because it's true about you. You know, back in his day, you know, when he would say things like that, he would call God his Father. All the religious community would go up in an uproar. Who do he think he is? Because basically to call God your Father is to say that God not only is your Father, but God is your essence. God is your nature. Therefore, as God is, so am I. And even John picked up on the revelation when he said, when he said, as he is, so are we in this world. Not when we leave this world, but as he is now. How is God now? How is the exalted Christ now? So even that same reference that you used, that same book that we used to bring about a sense of sin consciousness, fear, and guilt in humanity. That same book said, oh no, he said, as he is, so are we in this world. I like the way Paul put it in Ephesians. He said, before the foundation of the world, before we came up with these weird ideas, these vain imaginings, before we created a self-image about ourselves that was not real. He said, before that happened, he said, God had already determined and preordained that we should be what? Holy and blameless and guiltless and sinless before him in love. It was already determined. Why? Because that's the way it always has been. That's the way it always will be. And so that whole concept of the S word is false. He said, it's false. He said, it is a false idea about God's creation. It's a false idea about ourselves. So when we hold that false idea that we are inferior with God, when we hold a false idea, it creates an inferiority complex in us. When we hold a false idea about ourselves, we see all of ourselves as separate from one another. We see us separate from our Creator. And so we make a world like we've made, where we see an enemy on every corner, where we see a devil on every corner, where we make up an idea about, the burning inferno at the end. It's almost like a Steven Spielberg movie. Well, we made it all up. And even in us making up all these weird ideas, it hasn't changed reality. It haven't affected heaven. It haven't changed who God created. It haven't changed your true identity. You may have affected your self-image of yourself, but it has not changed reality. You are still the sinless, the guiltless one. You are still that one that God told Jeremiah, that I knew thee before you was formed in your mother's womb. And the way I knew you then is the way I know you now, as the sinless, guiltless creation. You're my offspring. To call yourself a sinner, to call anyone a sinner, is to call God that, because that which God created It's guiltless and sinless. How can you get that? It's not possible. Even in our natural law, you cannot get an apple by planting a strawberry seed. It's my strawberry example. This is an orange. You can't get a strawberry by planting an orange seed. No, the law, even in the natural, said every seed produces after its own kind. So if that's the way it is in the natural, that's the way it is in the spirit. God is spirit. And so God, who is spirit, God who is love, God who is infinite, God is who is impersonal, God who is formless and timeless, can only produce after his own kind. So that which God extended in creation, which is you and me, it's just like God. In fact, it's not just like God, but it is the very nature and essence of what God is. There is only the one. And so where is this idea? Where is this tiny mad idea of separation? Where is it now? Where did it come from? Is it even possible? So it would have to only be what? In the dream-like, vain imagining, a hallucination. And we're still having some of the residual effect. But that's why Truly Foundation is here, ladies and gentlemen. To be a lighthouse, to provide a space whereby this advanced spirituality can now come as a what? As a vaccination. The truth is our vaccination to get rid of the virus of the belief in separation and sin consciousness and guilt and fear. It's the only vaccination that will work. It's 100%. It ain't 90 or 89. No, it's 100% when you embrace the truth of who you are. There is a money back 100% guarantee. In fact, God said in his word, when he could swear by no greater, when he could find no panel, when he could find no other evidence, when he could find no greater, he couldn't find anything greater to bet on but himself. He said when he could swear by no greater, he swore by himself. That truly, the real you loves you because the real you is love. He guaranteed, he made a promise to himself. He made an oath to himself that all humanity will eventually wake up to the truth of who they are. That is God's promise. And it is happening one by one by one by one. It's happening. It's happening every day. People are waking up to the truth of who they are. People are walking away from this false self that they made. People are walking away from this whole idea that they've been changed. No, they haven't been changed. They have recognized enlightenment is not a change, it's but a recognition. Because there's nothing need to be changed. Everything remains as God created. That doesn't mean that there's nothing to be changed. There only needs to be a recognition of what the truth is. And that's why we're here. And that's why we use the course, because we downloaded this course as a tool to kind of straighten up the mess. Not to attack anyone, it's not about that at all. It's about what? We're all. Now, if you want to say we all fell hook, line, and sinker for that idea. And you see the craziness in the world that it has produced. And that craziness is coming because people have a false image of themselves. They have a false idea about who they are. They don't know who they are. When one comes to the place where they say there must be a better way because this ain't working, there must be a better way. It is in that moment, like when the prodigal son came to himself and said, what? I'm going back home to my father. That's what this is all about. That's what your life is all about. It's about your return home to that which has not been altered, your return to the Father. And then as you get more and more expanded awareness, you realize what? Hey, I never left home. I'm on this journey without a distance. I can't be nowhere but in God, because that's the only reality there is, that God is my very life. That all the time I was abiding in love. But I took a long nap and I had what? Nightmares. But when I have awakened to the truth. And that truth had what? Set me free. And so there is no sin. And they called him, all the religious people of his day called him, say, look, he hanging out with all the wine bibbers and all the sinners. He because they were seeing themselves in their own self separated righteousness. But in reality, nothing has changed. And he says, what is it but a false idea about God's Son? And this is where forgiveness comes in. It says forgiveness merely sees that falsity, that error. See, there is no sin. We do make an error. And we do make mistakes in our thinking. But just think about it. Errors and mistakes, they can be what? They can be corrected. And that's what we're doing here. We're going through this 365 days of correcting our thinking. The concept of sin was made up by humanity, had the connotation that what? Sin is unto what? Unto death. It can't be what? It can't be corrected. We made that up as a substitute to the truth. And put ourselves under the law of what? Sin and death. We did it to ourselves. But we say that God did it, or we say God required it. Not true. How can love require anything but love? And so it says, through the course and Jesus' brand of forgiveness, we merely see the falsity in that idea. And therefore, we let it go. We just let it go. We no longer give it any value. We no longer give it any credence. I haven't fallen from nowhere. If nothing else, I've been elevated from glory to glory. God is an upward, ever extending expansion of himself. There is no opposite in God. There is no opposite in love. So when we wake up to this reality, we become one with this ever expanding, ever extension of love. Paul calls it, we go from glory to glory. And it happens. It can only happen as we invite, embrace, and accept this truth. Truth as our very own. It says, so what then is free? When the false idea of separation is recognized and is let go, it says, what is free, or what is the result of that? He said, what is free to take its place is now the will of God. So what is the will of God? That you become aware of the knowledge of the truth of who you are and who God is. and that there's only the one, and that the one is the one that we share with God. Impregnable, impossible to be separate, impossible for there to be any other vibration other than the vibration of love. It is possible for anything else to truly exist. What is left is but the will of God. And so with that, now I can go to my lesson. Let's turn back over to 259. It's going to make a whole lot of sense now. I like what Paul said over in Paul got a glimpse of this over in Hebrews, in the book of Hebrews. If you're a Bible scholar, I am. I love the Bible. I even love it more now because I now approach it through reality. I read it through the eyes of love, and so I'm able to eat the meat and spit out the bones, because there's a lot of bones in that reference, but there's a lot of revelation in that reference. But 259 now it says, "Let me remember there is no sin." Now it makes sense, right? Why? Because at some point we failed to remember. We lost our way. The mind became like a runaway child. And we couldn't remember who we were. But now we remember. He says, so let us remember that there is no separation. The S word now becomes separation. When you think of it like that, there is no sin. There is no separation. There's only oneness. It's only God, and there's nothing else. So if I exist, and I know that I do because I'm aware of it, I'm aware and I'm conscious. But that awareness and the consciousness that you have is God. It's God. You couldn't be aware and conscious without the life of God, because that's the only life there is. There's the only being there is. There's the only self there is. So we all share this one God self. Jesus understood that. That's why he said, I and the Father are one. So that same self is the self that you are. And you can now say that you and the Creator are one. You and all of life is one. You share the same being that God is. There's not God in me and you and they. No, it's only one of us being expressed in a perceptual world. As many of us, but it's only one. See, it takes revelation. It takes awareness of this reality that turns on the bright lights in your life to where now you see, you experience, you hear everything from this place of oneness. And when you see everything from this place of oneness, you see only love. And then your life becomes what? And like he said, the light of the world, where you teach only love, for love is what we are. Love is what all humanity is. And we just recognize that humanity, when it is miscreating or making up these ideas from a false place, it's just a call for love. We don't judge them, but it's just a call for love. They're crying out for love. They want to remember who they are. That's why Jesus said, remember. He said, do this in remembrance of me. To do what? What is he talking about? Do what in remembrance of me? Remember, there is no sin. Remember, there's no separation. Not in remembrance of him as a person, but in remembrance of what he stood for as the truth, as the light, as the life. No separation, oneness. And so, Now I can get through the lesson. Let me remember that there is none. Yeah, that's why you are holy. That's why he said that you should be holy and without blame, because you're sinless and guiltless, just like your Father. You are. So it says, sin is the only thought that makes the goal of God seem unattainable. So the whole idea of sin consciousness, guilt, and fear, it seems to make the goal of God seem unattainable. You know, how do you say, well, only God is perfect. Only God is holy. Only God is this. Only God gets the glory. When you're thinking that way and you don't see the equality you have with God and the oneness you have with God, that's just an indication that it seems to you that the equality or the attainment or the oneness that is your reality is unattainable. It seems that way to you. Because in reality, God can't get any glory without you. God is not God unless there's equality with you. Where there's no equality, there is no love. It's even that way in the natural. You know it's got to be that way in reality. Where there is no equality, there's no love. If you even think that God withheld something from you, if you even think that God was not showing all of his hand, if you even thought that God didn't give you everything in creation, then you think God was withholding from you. And so there would be no love. There would truly be a disconnect. And that disconnect happens in our minds because that's what we believe. And that's not the truth. What else could blind us to the obvious? What else could blind you to the obviousness of oneness? The belief that there's more than one. What could blind you to the obvious that you and God are one? The idea that you're not. See? It says, what makes the strange and the distorted seem more clear? What makes sin seem more logical and right? Till we embrace it as our very own nature, our very own self, to where we call one another that. What does that? What makes that strange and distorted seems more clear? We're not remembering who we are. That's what makes it impossible. He says, what else but sin engenders our attacks? All the attacks that you see in the world where humanity is attacking itself and each other, that is coming from a belief in separation. It is coming from the idea it's coming from the lost identification of who we really are. That is at the root of it. That's what needs to be corrected. And it only can be corrected through the truth. That is true always. And that's why we're here on this platform, sharing the truth that is true always, so humanity can wake up to the reality of its oneness, so we can stop all the cray-cray, stop all the foolishness, stop all the insanity. Falling into the trap, the religious trap, the political trap, the sporting trap, the entertainment trap, all these are the art trap, all these things. There's nothing wrong with any of them. What is wrong is our perception. What is wrong is our thinking. Because when our thinking is corrected, all of that is seen in a different light and for a different purpose and for a different reason. And then you can richly enjoy it. You can really thoroughly now enjoy it when seen through the eyes of God. When seen through the eyes of love. When seen through the eyes of our oneness. He said, what else but sin engenders our attack? What else but sin could be the source of guilt and demanding punishment and suffering? That's where the idea that you deserve punishment or you're unworthy, all of this, it comes from that idea. What else could bring that idea about? A guilt, punishment, and suffering. And people are punishing themselves and demanding punishment of others, and engaging in self-suffering. We suffer needlessly because of a lack of knowledge. It said without a vision, the people what? Suffer needlessly. Humanity has always suffered needlessly because of a lack or a failure to remember who we are. And what about? But the false idea of sin could be the source of fear in obscuring God's creation. What keeps us in fear? What keeps us not having a proper view of what God created? And what did God create? You and me. What keeps you in a place where you have a self-image of yourself that is inferior to God? Where did it come from? Giving love the attributes of fear and of attack. And what crazy false idea that was made up by man and passed down to all generations. And we're still having the residual effects. But be not dismayed when you wake up to the awareness of who you are. All humanity wakes up. Why? Because there's only one of us. And Jesus understood this. So he was not taken away by the false idea that mankind had of themselves. He was not taken away by the all the special effects that this world will show you. He wasn't. He was convinced of who he was. Are you convinced of the truth of your creation? That's all it takes. That's all it takes. So, we're going to conclude the day lesson by saying, Father. We say, Father, ooh, Daddy, forgive me. I played the game. I played the children's game. I played with sharp-edged children toys. Now you know what that S stands for on Superman. Silliness. What is that for? A silly idea. So, Father, we would not be insane today because sin leads to insanity. The false idea of separation leads to insanity. And we've seen it. We see it on display. We watch and listen to it every day. How it's happening. He say, we would not be afraid of love. That's what the false idea of a false self leads to what? Fear of love. When love is all, why would you be afraid of love when love is all there is? God said, I am love. God said, I am light, and in me there is no darkness. There is no opposite. Then he turned around and he said that everything that is born of God is born of love. So all of us were born of God. So we're in love too. That's why we say here, and we run this ticker. The real you loves you. Why? Because the real you is love. There is no sin in love. That's not even an idea. Doesn't even come up. It's impossible. I will not be afraid of love, nor seek for refuge in its opposite. Why? Because there is no opposite in love. In other words, we're saying, I will not seek for refuge in illusions, in a false idea about myself or about my brother or about humanity or about all living things. For love can have no opposite. It can have no opposite. That means there is no opposite in you. There is no false self that has any value at all. All that we make up about ourselves, it has zero value. Why? Because it is not real. It's not true. It's not eternal. It's not infinite. It's not changeless. So it's impossible to be you. So he says, for love can have no opposite. It says, God, love is our source. God is our source. God is our reality of everything that is real. And everything that is, which is God. God is. Remember, we said this on a couple of lessons ago. God is, and there is nothing else. So therefore, you would have to be a part of the God is, and you are. So it says God is, and everything that is remains with God. And God with it. Ooh. And that God with it is you. God with what? That which he created, that which he extended, which is you. So now, do you see the impossibility? Now do you see the absolute insanity for ever thinking of yourself or anyone else as separate from God, as in sin or as a sinner? Who shall bring one charge against the elect of God? Who shall bring one charge? None of our judgments have changed who God made us to be. None of our judgments have changed who our neighbor is. That's why he say, love your neighbor. As you love what? Yourself. Why? He said, because you are love and so is your neighbor. He said, love God as yourself. Why? Because you are God and God are you. It can't be any other way. Any other way only leads to what? Pain and suffering and fear and guilt and a consciousness of separation. That's where it comes from. So all we have to do is do nothing. We just let it go. And when we let that go, all that is left is the truth. All that is left is the light that was already there. You become to know who you really are. You are the light of the world. You are the holy home of God, as the Course says. You in of yourself is a miracle. What is the miracle? Your shift in perception. Your shift in the way that you now, in this perceptual world, the way you now perceive. You perceive through what? Christ's vision. The vision of oneness. The vision of wholeness and completion. And so now what? You teach only love, because love is all it is. And eventually, this body will follow, because the body is neutral. The body will follow your mindset. The body will engage into action now, because your feelings is going to be feelings of oneness. Love, joy, and peace and happiness. That's the way. That's the process of transformation. That's the process of being renewed in our minds and not being conformed to this world, but being transformed by the renewing of our minds, that we may prove what is that good and perfect and it's what? An acceptable will of God. That good and acceptable and perfect will of God. Yeah, you are the perfect will of God. Yes, you are. I'm here to tell you. What are you going to do with that? Don't do anything with it. Just sit in it. Abide in it. It's the truth. And extend it in everything that you do and say and be. And you are indeed the light. You become the savior of the world, just like your elder brother. Why? Because your holiness is always shining. And there is nothing that your holiness cannot do. Nothing. Nothing becomes impossible to you. That's what Jesus meant when he said nothing is impossible to them that believe. Believe what? Believe who they are. Not just believing God, that there's a God or that there is God. That's not a belief. That's a belief in separation. No, those that believe that they are one with God and one with each other. And there's nothing impossible to you. Absolutely nothing. Who do you say that you are? You are the Christ. I say that you are the Christ. God's creation that remained as God created it. And so it is. And amen. And so it is. There's nothing else to say. God is, and we cease to speak. Therefore, I am. Thank you so much. You might need to listen to this one a few times. I know this strikes at the root of humanity's seeming problem. There is no problem. When you start thinking like this, you realize there is no problems. You're not concerned about what's happening in the world. Why? Because that's like going to the movie. That's all made up. As real as it may seem, as depressing that it makes people, as fearful, as angry that what is put on display will make one feel. When you wake up to the reality that there's only one reality, that there's God and nothing else, then you realize the falsity. You realize the special effects that this world will put on display to get you to stay in that mentality of separation, sin, guilt, and fear. You realize like this song say, roll, roll, roll your boat gently down the stream. Merrily, 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 life is but a dream. And so you don't take it serious. And you remain, and what, like you said, therein lies the peace of God. You know, the Bible talks about a peace that passes the human understanding. Well, this, I just shared it with you. It is the awareness of yourself, your guiltless, sinless self. That's where the peace that passes understanding comes from. That's where you will experience it now. It's not complicated. It's simple. What I just shared is simple. It's not a complicated message at all. And when humanity embraces this, and all the problems will be what? All the seeming problems will exist no more. That's what Gary Renard meant when he wrote the book, The Disappearance of what? The Disappearance of the Universe. All of this falsity will finally disappear. And the only thing that will be left is reality. And it simply happens by letting it go. So what are you holding on to? What ideas are you holding on to that is causing you nightmares, causing you to have difficulty with yourself in relationships? What ideas are you holding on to that is causing you to have lack in your life, causing you to have bad feelings towards others and yourself and God? And what are you holding on to? What's in your past that is so real that it makes reality fall apart? What is it? What experience have you had? Nothing. Nothing. When you go and sit and watch a movie and you enjoy the movie and you're entertained by the movie, the whole time you know the movie's not real, but hey, they don't stop you from enjoying it. But when the movie is over, what do? You get up and walk away. You leave your popcorn and your Coke, your M&Ms on the floor. You know you do. And you get up and walk away. And you don't walk away thinking, oh, this is terrible. You don't get up walking away thinking the lion and the tiger and the bear are going to chase you once you walk out the theater. No, it was just a movie. Well, now that you know that sin was just a false idea, you don't have to carry the consciousness of it anymore. Just let it go. Because you are holy. That is the truth. You are righteous. That is the truth. You are eternal. You are infinite. You're not a personal self, but you're an impersonal self. Why? Because you share the same self that God is. So that means you're not personal. You're impersonal. And you're no longer unaware. You now are what? Aware, or you're self-aware. So there's nothing that's standing between you and your experience of your true self. Just walk in it. Have fun in it. Feel all the good feelings. And then wherever you go, share it. Don't go looking. You realize now, I'm not out there. All that I was looking for, I had it all the time. So you now go out and share it with others. Hold a space for others until they can hold that space of oneness for themselves. Now your life has what? Deep meaning and good purpose. Now you know what it means really to be the light of the world. Now you know what it means to have a self-image about yourself that is in alignment and in harmony with the real you, which is love. Now you know. And now you got this great big smile on your face. And people wonder, what's wrong with you? Don't you know what's going on? And you say, yeah, I know what's going on. And I'm so happy about it. Oh my God. How sweet it is to be loved by God. Thank you so much. I've had fun today, and I hope you have. I told you this was going to be a grand day. Yeah. Every day is a grand day. And we'll see you on tomorrow at this. I won't say the same time because I don't do this at the same time every day. And some days I don't do it, but I'm going to finish this project that I started. And that is, I'm doing commentary on all 365 workbook lessons out of A Course in Miracles to help humanity to gain clarity, to help humanity become miracle workers in the world. That's what you are, a miracle worker. Once you have the miracle, once you realize that you are the miracle, then you become the miracle worker. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.